In the deep recesses of one's mind, there is a voice, a guiding light through the darkness, a connection to the other side.
You're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up. And if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending that you're just a poor little me.
Pathway to spiritual that echoes with enlightenment. The voice of spirit.
The voice of spirit.
You are a function of this total galaxy, bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore, this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies.
Your journey starts here and now. With your host and connection to spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Hi, very warm welcome, and certainly good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you happen to be in the world. You're listening to Leo Bonomo on KCOR. We've got a lovely guest, Jen SluMac. I hope I pronounced that right. And if you want to ask her about anything, you can get us on 702-425-9230, or you can get us on Facebook in the chat line, or you can get us on the chat line in the interview. Jen's an author of a book called Soul Not Skin, and I just love that title because we are spirit having a human experience, as my friend David Clark says, and that's certainly very emotive, that title, in that way. Another thing I love, Jen calls herself a hope dealer, and I just love that phrase. I think everyone that works within the light community, as well as other communities, it's so important to give hope. She's a mentor, writer, educator, a performer and a producer, and she has her own radio show, excuse me, amongst other things. She's in long-term recovery from alcoholism and has been seen on NBC, MTV, Logo, and if you look really close, in Comedy Central. She creates media to inform and inspire while seeking to empower those who live on the margins of society, which again is such a worthwhile thing. Her purpose, she says, is to be useful rather than awesome. And she has worked inside prisons, jails, faith communities, and education systems that often harm rather than rehabilitate. And I'm sure we're all acquainted with that in one form or another. Her lifelong faith journey continues, and she feels that her real work has just begun. And she creates, grows and loves from Northern California, where she lives with her wife, Jessie, multiple fur babies, and her lovely son named Ian. I do apologise, I've still got a bit of a throat there. Having tried to introduce you, how are you, Jen?
Hi, I'm doing wonderfully, and you did a wonderful job, even with the throat.
Thank you. I've had this.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's my privilege. It really is. I think one of the things that really inspires me, I've not read your book. I haven't had time to get it. But I think one of the things that really inspires me is the way that you involve yourself with the community and all those that can be kind of sidelined and marginalised. Because to me, that is a sign of a great light worker. You know, we talk about mediums, we talk about psychics, we talk about healers, but there's all different ways of healing. And I can see that the way that you sort of integrate yourself with that is very much a healing thing. Yeah. So, sorry, go on.
It's okay. I was just going to say, I haven't used that language before myself, but as you say it, I mean, I can certainly appreciate what you're saying. I think, I certainly try to be somewhat of a light in the world. I know that there's just so much that, there's so much that stands between us that we've constructed, the ideas that we use to separate ourselves from each other, and, all of the barriers that those things can create within an individual, that then become their own constructs and their own barriers. And it's, so much of so much of what we encounter in this material world is story, is narrative, is idea, and we use those things, often misinformed, to sabotage ourselves and our connection and our thriving as a universal force. I mean, we have such capacity, and we get tangled in our humanity so desperately at times that I just watch it. It breaks my heart. So I try to move through the world in a way that brings light and hope and compassion, and just, walk alongside folks who are in the throes of, I'm just going to say simply, in the throes of being human, right? Because really that's what the pain is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're all here to learn, and some lessons are harder than others. But I agree with you. I think we do get sabotaged from early on. And one example that was given to me years ago, which, when people mention it, suddenly the light goes on. You think, oh, yeah. And we get sabotaged from school because we're not brainwashed exactly, but they don't teach us some of the essentials of life, like do be careful with your money, try not to take out loans. I mean, we get enslaved from day one, don't we? With it's so normal, isn't it, to have credit cards and have a mortgage and do this and that, and it's just ways of holding us down, holding us to ransom.
Well, sure, and I think that's really right on the money, and that's what I'm talking about when I say just the human experience. Because the truth is, we have these cultures, right? Cultures that can be as large, as vast as global culture, to our nations, to our towns, to our homes, to our communities, to our families, and these agreed upon ideas of how things operate. And of course, any school that we're in is going to operate from within the culture, and the culture of being human is to be in fear and to have a desire to belong, and those two things combined when you get toward funding schools and funding religious organizations and funding political campaigns. Fear and belonging are two things that are going to drive those mechanisms, when really what the human spirit, excuse me, and the human soul needs is a lack of fear and more community and faith, right? A belief in something that I can't see, but that I align with quite naturally. And so, we need to learn how to be human better. We can't keep shunning human, right? We have to accept that we are spirit, as you said earlier, that David Clark said, and I love David. You said that he said earlier that we are spirit having a human experience, and I would love to see us learn to embrace our humanity so that we can do it as well as our spirits might have us do it.
Yeah, I know that there's a big contradiction because governments, media generally, science, religion, they're not very open to spirit, that kind of thing. I mean, they're gradually weakening, but it's a real contradiction because, for example, the the United States government, they spend around 70 million a year on psychic investigations, with NASA, with the military. They use remote viewing, so they fully endorse it. But when you come to the public face of that, it's like, no, this doesn't work, it's rubbish. And again, I think this arises from the fact that if we suddenly had this knowledge and it was accepted, people would realize that actually we don't need governing in the normal sense. We don't need control. And if this thing is real about spirit, then we could become much more loving. It gives so much freedom, doesn't it? And I think that's why on the surface they're all against it.
Oh, well, sure. I'm not, I do what I can to stay out of politics and all of that sort of, being informed enough to vote. But besides that, I try to spend my time and my energy in spaces of spirit and healing and community and those types of places, because that's the hope and that's the news that I want to be following. There's so much news on the ground happening with folks healing and improving their lives and getting back to family and recovering from addiction. But that's my newsreel. I like to keep my hand on the pulse of things. And I would say to you, I think you're right. The contradiction is huge. And, money is, the love of money is soil ripe for exploitation. And if you have faith and if you have people who are governed by spirit rather than other things, entities, constructs, then, there's less money to be made. So if we were to reduce the fear that we have among us, then we wouldn't need, all the money.
Absolutely. And, there is that old saying, isn't there, that money can't buy happiness, it can't buy you love. And it's actually very true. I've known now 7 millionaires. I worked for 5 of them, and only knew one that was happy, and he didn't give a damn about money. It just happened to be good at making it. But he was just so laid back.
Right.
Because there is this fallacy, isn't there, that the more money you get, the better you're going to be, and the two just don't really go together. It's a modern myth, isn't it? Grab more, you'll feel better.
Yeah. There's a documentary that I used to teach from in the jail when I worked inside of the county jail that I would spend about 3 weeks on with my men. And it's called Happy, and it's about positive psychology, and it talks about the hedonic treadmill and how we are conditioned to enjoy the surge of happiness that comes from acquiring, but then it quickly fades, and we need to acquire again. And it's just this like miserable sort of, as you said earlier, slavery that we have to stuff. And the idea that they brought up in there regarding money was certainly if you're making not enough money to care for yourself, money can be a tremendous way to buy happiness if it's going to get you food and shelter and safety, right? Yep. But once you've hit a certain place, maybe 40,000, 50,000, depending on cost of living where you are, there is an amount past which money is not going, happiness will not necessarily increase outside of the hedonic treadmill beyond that salary. So it's a matter of what I'm learning in my life is I've always wanted to be rich. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought that money would bring relief of a lot of the different struggles that I've endured. What I know today is it may have, but ultimately it would have been a temporary solution, because until I've done the work inside of myself and with my relationship with myself, with my spirit, with God, and with others, until I've done that work, everything else is just a quick fix.
Yeah, it's destructive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very much a drug, as you say. You get a quick fix, that burns off, you need it again. Yeah. And a lot of times the money, what it does is it buys me the quick fix of that underlying desire to belong, right? I want to look like I am somebody to you. Yeah. And in looking like I am somebody to you with my nice clothes, my pool, my fancy car, you take the millionaire that you spoke of who was not happy with all of those things, and you find somebody who still has, sadness and resentment and other things that they haven't worked out within themselves. But you take the other millionaire that you spoke of who is at peace and happens to make money and have nice things, and, he might give those keys away at the drop of a dime because he's okay with himself. Absolutely, and it was a lovely Jewish man. We both worked in the jewelry trade, and I worked for him. And he was very open. You know, one time he said to me, I happened to be talking about money, and I wasn't asking for anything. He said, "Well, if you need a couple of thousand, you know, and when you pay it back, you pay it back." And I never took the loan, but that was just his attitude. You know, as you've aptly described.
Yeah.
You know, he's got no hang-ups with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's moving on to sort of jails and prisons. They're constructed certainly from many years ago for absolute punishment. Now there seems to be a slight swing, and I do think it is slight, to reformation. But generally, it's still a destructive thing, isn't it?
Yeah, boy, I don't even know where to start. You know, it's part of that which is constructed by human fear.
Yeah.
Right. It's human fear manifested in buildings and you know, generating money that we love to get our hands on. Right, at the expense of people who have not learned they have a voice.
Yes.
And that's a very simplified explanation of, you know, what I've witnessed. And I can't claim to be an expert. I'm not going to be accurate with statistics. I'm not that girl. But what I can tell you is that having taught inside for many years, knowing people who have been incarcerated, knowing people who have been victims of crime, being at that table in different seats, you know what I mean? Having seen the issue from several angles, and also knowing many folks who are in recovery, long-term recovery, who have spent time in jails and prisons through their addiction. What I can tell you from my observation is it's a lot easier for us to say that the bad guys are locked up and we're safe. It's harder to say that that's a lie. First of all, people are not good and bad. People do good and bad things. And that is generated from individuals' capacity to connect with something greater, whether that something greater be belonging in their family, belonging in their home, belonging in their community, belonging to spirit. If people feel disconnected from that, the human being takes over, fear ignites, overcompensates, and sort of hedonic treadmills on feeling something. And unfortunately, taking, right, can be what gives somebody power who feels powerless. Taking from another human being in physical form, sexual form, abusive form. None of these things are pretty. None of these things are easy to talk about. I don't think that jails and prisons should disappear. I think they serve a purpose. I just think that they serve a purpose for far fewer folks than live in them right now. Bond, the cost of bond on the majority of folks who are incarcerated. People can't afford, you're incarcerating folks who don't know they have a voice or haven't learned to use it or haven't been listened to. Either way, oftentimes poverty-stricken or addicted or dealing with mental health issues. And then you've got bond that people cannot afford. So they're in jail for months, years prior to a court date. Before they're even adjudicated, before they're even sentenced or found guilty of a crime, they are locked up for years at times. Because, and what that does to, building separation into a family structure and with children and their parents and abandonment issues and all of that, none of that is helping. The damage is so much greater than that which puts somebody in there. I had people in my class who, got caught possession of a certain amount of marijuana or drugs or something like that, which is the operating currency in their community. I mean, it is the currency. It is the business in their community. It's the only operating currency they have access to. Yeah. And go ahead.
Sorry, carry on.
Not at all.
It seems to me a little bit like the old debtors' prisons that we had here from, the 1700s onwards. That you owed a bit of money, and it could literally be pennies. But if somebody come and asked you for it and you didn't have it, you could get locked up. And not only could you get locked up, they could hold the whole family in prison until the debt was paid. But of course, if you're in prison, you can't earn.
Exactly.
And it seems like a sort of modern day version of that. I can't imagine how that fact alone would make you feel. But as you've said, to understand that it could be years before you're found innocent. It's a terrible thing.
Well, and thank you for saying that about those age-old debtors' prisons, because pardon my ignorance, I wasn't aware of that, but I do absolutely see the similarity, and I see the capacity for destruction of entire generations of people. I mean, you really just are, you're breaking up families in ways that cannot repair themselves, because so when you take somebody and you put them into a community that is not functioning well already, and they do what they have to do to survive, or what they perceive they have to do, what culture tells them they have to do, right? Because remember, as human beings, our primary desire is to belong. So I'm going to belong where my culture says I am good. So I partake in those behaviors and I do those things, and then I'm thrown into a situation where I have to acquire certain defensive strategies to survive and to maintain my safety, and my family has to struggle. And what we are not doing in any of these situations is finding solutions for the original issues, for the original problems. We're not helping people develop themselves and their skills. We're not helping people develop emotional intelligence or relationships with people in a healthy way. Everybody's resentful because nobody's around to help. Everybody's stretched too thin. It's devastating. It's devastating.
Yeah, it seems to me it's a very warlike mentality. As you say in the States, hunker down and just deal with it. Which is such a destructive thing. We've got probably about a minute to go now before we go into the break, and we'll continue on this theme because there's a gentleman, he's passed over now, called Leslie Flint. I don't know whether you've heard of him, but I'll explain a little bit more about him and his wonderful mediumship, because there's something quite relevant here. So we're just going to go into a break. If you do want to call it 702-425-9230, and we'll be straight back after this.
This is the voice of spirit, your connection to the other side.
To understand something spiritually, you must experience it. And in order to experience it, you have to experience it in your imagination.
Explore with us by calling 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Everything that now exists was once imagined. Therefore, everything that is going to exist must first be imagined.
Back with your guide to spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Leo Bonomo.
After these brief words from our sponsors. Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code Radio10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
You love them enough to do anything for them.
Mom, I need to be wiped.
Coming!
Including checking nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Do you love new music? Yeah! Then tune into the Americana Music Hour, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, Sundays at 3 p.m. Sponsored by Music for Hope. From the West Coast to the East Coast and everywhere in between, Mike Jones will introduce you to artists both old and new. The Americana Music Hour, where we showcase new talent as well as artists from around the world. Mike Jones brings you a fresh new perspective, as well as shows you where it's happening and who's making it happen here in Vegas, as well as around the world. The Americana Music Hour, every Sunday at 3 p.m., exclusively on KCOR, the Digital Radio Network.
It's great! I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great.
Make a note of it.
It's great!
We interrupt this program to annoy you and make things generally irritating.
At the end of the day, we turn the lights down in the KCOR studio.
Oh, sweet.
And crank up the hottest club songs from around the world.
This is the future.
The Grind, mixed by Tina Marie, your Vegas vixen of the high desert.
What about the body? What kind of body? Good body. Nice body.
Every night from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Pacific. The best 3 hours of commercial-free music.
New music first.
It's time to stand up and dance your ass off. The Grind, nightly and exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Come on, it's kind of hot.
Welcome back to the Voice of Spirit, your connection to the other side.
There's no accidents in this universe. We all show up here with a purpose. There's an intelligence that is a part of everything and everyone, and all of us are connected to it.
Connect with us on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Even better, join us live in our chat room at kcorradio.com. To get a free reading during the show, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers, use Skype name KCOR Radio. And now, inspirational clairvoyant medium, psychic, and your connection to the spirit, the host of the Voice of Spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Hi, welcome back. It's a real privilege for me to talk to Jen SluMac, author of Soul Not Skin. She's a stand-up comedian, a radio presenter on Soul Not Skin Radio. And if you want to look her up, you can also go to Soul Not Skin. It's all one word, soulnotskin.com, and you can find her on Facebook, etc. And do listen to her radio show. So welcome back, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you.
We were talking before the break about jail and prison and that very oppressive regime that's there. And I was privileged to sit with a gentleman called Leslie Flint. And if anyone wants to listen, you can go to www.Leslie, it's Leslie Flint, Flint, leslieflint.com. And he was a direct voice medium, and what that entails basically, it's quite a complicated process, but voices appear in mid-air, and you can have intelligent conversations with them. And Leslie produced over 6,000 recordings during his lifetime, and one of those recordings, which I will get to play on air at some point. There are two lords, Lord Birkett and Lord Birkenhead, and they were known as the hanging judges. And whilst they were here in the body, quite successful, their point of view was, we're dealing with a problem, it has to be done, it's good, it's punishment, they're not going to hurt anybody else. But when they passed over, they realized just how much terror and fear just being on death row had caused people,
Yeah.
And is that something, because I know that you're a bit sensitive yourself, and we talked during the break, I worked in a school for a couple of months, and I just couldn't take the energies. And I think it's very brave of you to be sensitive and yet to place yourself, it's obviously, what you're meant to do, but to place yourself in that situation with all that energy there.
Leo, I don't know if it's brave or just stupid, and I haven't figured it out yet. But I appreciate you saying that. God, I love the story that you just shared. The hanging judges. I think it really speaks to. I think. Sorry, I get such a big idea. I have to break it down into pieces because I can't communicate it. It happens like a traffic jam, and then I have to try to line the cars up before I speak. Forgive me.
No, that's fine. It happens to me when I read as well. There's a lot of information.
Okay.
Oh, slow down. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
I'm like, okay. Oh, that's great. Okay, so you appreciate that. The story with the hanging judges that you just shared, and them realizing not until they were on the other side, so to speak, what agony and trauma they had caused people in looking forward, being on death row and such, and I think that speaks tremendously to the problems that we have with our systems and our institutions. They're not just destructive to folks who are incarcerated. The people who work there, the people who inflict the harm, the officers, the teachers who are there to help, the nursing staff who's there to medicate, all of the people engaging in a system that creates harm are affected by the energies that creating harm generates. Everybody is, and it unfortunately, as you said in your story, people during the course of the story unfolding, maybe a correctional officer or an officer or somebody might think, I'm doing the right thing, or maybe a doctor is saying, I'm doing the right thing, trying to help people, or trying to put away the bad guy, or trying to keep my kids safe, or trying to keep society clean. And the mindset is that what they're doing is good, but the whole time the body develops disease, and the body develops cancer, and the body develops stress, and relationships are broken, and families fall apart, and all of. I hate to sound so morbid, but my point is simply, we don't know the harm we're causing until we wake up to it.
Absolutely.
And the consciousness is what I want to demonstrate around in the presence of the harming. In the presence of the harming, right? I want to be a light in the midst of that darkness, by example. I know that I can't tell somebody what they should or shouldn't do, but I can be something that somebody might aspire toward.
And again, I think that's wonderful. I mean, we all know, our children's lives, especially the first few years, but time goes so quick. When my ex-wife told me she was pregnant, obviously it was wonderful and everything, and I kind of turned around and she was 21. And I don't know where the time went. And of course, it's valuable time. And so I think even short sentences, if you've got a young family, I can see how that can be so destructive, because I say quite flippantly only 3 or 4 years. But 3 or 4 years to a child is a huge gap, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what it's about. In my book, I try to talk about how everyone is working on their own puzzle, and then we collide, right? Yeah. Everybody is trying to work out the puzzle of themselves, and we are all self-involved, at least to that extent, walking around here on this planet trying to figure out our own puzzles, and we collide. And those collisions oftentimes affect those who are lacking in development, those who are lacking in safety, in feeling like they have a safe place and belonging, absorb those things as true, absorb those collisions as true, and then begin to build a framework for their own life on those collisions rather than on an embrace. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. I'm a great follower of David Bowie, and I was watching a documentary of him once, and he was in a big limousine and they were traveling through the desert, and he was laughing because he says, there's a bloody waxworks in the desert, you'd think it'd melt, but as he was talking about that, he was saying there's a fly in my milk, and this fly can't help but absorb what's around it, and that was a reference to himself learning and being changed by so much, and such a genius in producing. But we're all like that, aren't we? We do drink up our atmosphere. I've been in some places which have been extremely haunted, and you walk in and the air literally bristles with it, and you either soak it up and deal with it, or you back away and think, no, thank you. But of course, if you're incarcerated, as you've said, you can't do that. And I just have this image, which hopefully the listeners can kind of get with as well, of being in a place where you are going to die. It could be tomorrow. It could be a couple of years. There isn't any hope. You're not even sure really of getting your next meal if someone wants to take it from you. There is nothing there. There is no hope. And I can imagine people saying, right, that's it, and turning into an animal because everything's taken. And, it's frightening prospects, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes. How can I plan tomorrow, or why would I plan tomorrow if there is no hope?
Yeah.
If I don't feel connected to my yesterdays, if I don't have a story that I am connected to, right? If my mother or father was incarcerated my whole life, then won't I aspire to be like them in the ways that a child aspires to be like or different than them? With what little I know. What little I know.
And as you say, with drugs, certainly in some communities, being in effect the only currency, what chance do you have? It's what do you feel about the death penalty? Because personally, I feel it may deter some. It's those that may think, well, I can do this and get away with it. It may deter some, but I feel that you've got two sections of society. You've got those that are mentally ill, that are it's never going to stop them. They're just going to explode one day, and you've got those that really just don't give a damn anyway. So it's not going to stop those. So do you think it's a deterrent at all?
Well, listen, I have done restorative justice work in the prisons, and there was a gentleman that I had the great fortune of meeting who was a chief in his tribe, and he told us a story about how there had never been a homicide in his community. And in his, and we were like, you're kidding me. And we're talking hundreds of years. And the story, whether it was full true or parable, but the story was there's been no homicide because the punishment for homicide or assisting in such is you get buried alive while the community watches. Yeah. So in that perspective, it may well deter to threaten somebody's death. My experience is that, and my thought about it is, if I had more faith that people were rightly made guilty, if I had more faith in the justice that was taking place, putting people on death row, I first of all think there'd be a lot less people. And absolutely. I might have a different feeling about whether I think it's a good idea or not. I think that we have ideas about what mental illness is and how much that actually affects people being dangerous. Something that a lot of people don't seem to realize is folks with mental illness will often be dangerous to themselves, if to anybody, rarely to others. And so we use that story, that myth, to comfort ourselves when we talk about having people on death row. I appreciate a desire for an eye if somebody that I love has been brutally murdered. I also recognize that killing somebody else does not bring the person that I miss back. This is something we could talk about forever. I don't have a hard and fast answer for you. I think there's
I don't think there is an easy answer, because yes, they won't do it again, whether they're innocent or not. They won't do it again. But it's not so much, I think, them not doing it again. It's trying to keep others from doing the same. And of course, illness, these things happen. It's part of life. But it's more the premeditated. You would hope it would stop, but who knows? Who knows? It's a difficult question. Tell us a little bit about your book. Well, this is a novel that I've written. It's inspired by my life. I've wanted to write. Well, I have been writing for many years. I haven't been able to put it into anything publishable, short of a few short stories here and there, a few magazine articles. But what I'm telling is just the story of otherness as I experienced it in my own life, being perceived as other. I think that we all have our own experience with it. I think that, my father's a Presbyterian minister. He is retired now, but he was a minister when I was a little girl. There's alcoholism in our family's home. There's, I realized at the age of 13, well, probably younger, but I think I actually formulated the thought in my own mind around 14 that I was gay. And so a lot of the ways that the ideas I'd adopted about who I am and who I'm supposed to be and who I'm allowed to be, and whether God loves me for different things or not, all of what that created in a young girl's life, and my journey through it, and my journey, out the other side. Ultimately, it's a story of hope. It's a story of, what we go through
growing up. I said to somebody not too long ago that, my story is spoken from the experience of being gay and the difficulty and the pain of being in the closet. But I don't believe that gay people are the only folks who know the closet. I think the closet is simply shame. I think it's shame, that we acquire from being taught who we are and who we are not allowed to be, or what we're allowed to talk about or not talk about that is true for us. And coming out of the closet is an experience, I believe, that, people have or don't have universally when they find their voice and they choose to use it. So
absolutely. I mean, there is a religion called spiritualism, and people sometimes ask me whether I'm a spiritualist, and I think they're quite shocked when I say no, but I would hope I was spiritual. And if we take, I was kind of brought up a Catholic, and Catholicism, we all know the story. It's the story of shame. You're dirty, so you need cleansing, and there's the whole guilt trip with that. And so it didn't really affect me because I saw spirit from the age of 2. So I could, as young as it was, I could still reason out that what I knew and was familiar, which was spirit, not long having been here and still connected, I could understand that there was a difference, and the difference was this place, but the truth was something else. So for me, there was never a real collision of ideas. I just knew that was something being said, the other thing's real. But with Catholicism in particular, there is this whole guilt trip, isn't there? And, we've come into this world stained and not good enough, and we've got all this sin, and we're capable of sin. It's that's the thing that I find odd with that and spiritualism.
Well, in the language... I'm sorry. Go ahead, Leo.
No. You're quite right. It's in the language. We're kind of indoctrinated with it. It's almost a brainwashing. As we said, we come in and we're indoctrinated in schools, and we think this way and we think that way, and we become enslaved. There's a whole mechanism there, isn't there?
Well, and that's the psychology of a human being, and the ability to, indoctrinate folks with ideas that then they cannot free themselves from, right? And that's the whole idea with oppression and compliance. And if we can build a world that we can control, then we can control it. But then we have all of these tragic things happen because people don't do well when they're not aligned with their spirit and with God and with love. They don't do well. They're not healthy. And so when you take a language and you put it with, a nun slapping a hand with a ruler of a child and calling them a sinner, then the word sin has that ugly burrowed brow in it. And that word sin has the snap of a ruler in it every time it's spoken. And let's take the monster of the word sin and put it on the table in front of us right now and inspect it a little bit. My understanding of the word sin is essentially separate it from all of that which we've been taught from churches and religion. And somebody just changed the channel because now I'm being blasphemous probably. But take the word sin, and my understanding of it, if we translate it into layman's terms, is that which impedes my connection to spiritual life. That which which impedes my connection and alignment with Holy Spirit. And man has taken that and run with it, and declared people sinners when that's the human experience. The human experience is, when I'm growing up in a culture that values money and flashy things, God isn't terribly appealing. That's all. And so I put money and flashing things ahead of my relationship with God. But as those flashy things and money and those things begin to fail my desire for peace, I become more open and willing to learn something different, right?
Yeah, and it's the human experience as we come here as a spirit to
Absolutely.
experience these things, and in a sense that there's no right or wrong decision because it's all learning process, but to understand it. But we live within these constraints, don't we? That we seem to accept. You know, everybody else is affected by it. Everybody else is doing it. Go with it. It must be right.
And thank you for saying that. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think it's critical to understand that human beings learn by bumping into things.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, as I often say, you know, none of us here are perfect, because if we were, we wouldn't be here. You know, it's a simple thing. We all fail. We've all got flaws. That's why we're here to learn. Yeah,
we're all in the factory, still getting bronzed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so where can we find your book?
Well, right now you can find it pre-orders available at my website, which is, as you said earlier, soulnotskin.com. That's all one word. And it will be available through Amazon. It releases this spring. Actual date is not for certain, but we're very excited. It's going to come out as an ebook, as a print book, and as an audiobook. I'm going to record my own audiobook for, you can get that on my website and also on Amazon, and a lot of other outlets will be putting it through. So you can find all of that on my website.
Fantastic. And it'd be really nice to have you back when it's released so we can remind listeners, etc. We can talk a little bit more about the book, because I think that would
I'd be honored.
I would be honored. Bless you. Okay, so we're just going to go into a break in a few seconds, and we'll be back with Jen, and we'll be talking a little bit more about her book, and we'll be right back after this.
You've been listening to Leo Bonomo, the host of The Voice of Spirit. Live every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on the show, guests, and host of The Voice of Spirit, or to book a private reading, please visit leo-bonomo.com. That's leo-bonomo.com. Your connection to the other side is just a phone call away. The Voice of Spirit.
It is amazing, is it not?
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
In the deep recesses of one's mind, there is a voice, a guiding light through the darkness, a connection to the other side.
You're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up. And if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending that you're just a poor little me.
Pathway to spiritual that echoes with enlightenment. The Voice of Spirit.
The Voice of Spirit.
You are a function of this total galaxy, bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore, this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies.
Your journey starts here and now. With your host and connection to Spirit, Leo Bonomo.
A very, very warm welcome back. We're talking to Jen SluMac about her book, about some of her experiences and her life. And I must say for myself, it's been very enlightening talking to her. So if you may have a question or you want to call in and just converse, it's 702-425-9230. You can, of course, get us in the KCOR chat room and in the chat room on Facebook. But welcome back, Jen.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to be silly and count myself the lucky one. I'm so happy to be here and so grateful to be on your show and with your listeners. So thank you.
Oh, it's bless you, and it's my privilege. Tell us how long the book took to write, because they can vary, can't they? My own book was written by Spirit, so I wasn't very involved with it, and I'm now trying to do other books which I'm a bit more involved with, and they are literally taking years. It's I can't handle it. Spirit can do it fine. Me.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because again, I may not have used that language myself, but now that you excuse me, now that you said it that way, I think that that's kind of what has happened. Is I have tried for years to write this book, and it wasn't time until it was time. And then when it was time, it just sort of fell out of me. So I imagine that's what you mean when you say that Spirit wrote it. It didn't take a whole lot of effort. It was a matter of sitting down and getting to it. I have a lot of different stories that I can't wait to write. This whole process of publishing this book has been such a new experience for me, and that it's been a real learning curve. And I'm, a one-woman shop at this point. So it's been a real journey in creating the stories. Let me say this. When I was living a lot of the story that inspired this, it was too difficult to write well. And now that I've healed from much of it, and I've learned who I am, and I've come to terms with myself and my truth and my spiritual nature and my relationship with God, now I'm telling a story from the scars, not from the wounds. And that's been a very different experience.
It is, and again, because as we live through it, I find it very interesting what you just said, that you're sort of writing it from the point of view of the scars, not the wounds, because again, we have to mature, we have to savor it, we have to take it apart, and then understand what we've learned, rather than I'm just hurting, because that's emotional, but it doesn't say anything. So I find that wonderfully expressive.
Thank you, and you're right, and I think that maturity has allowed me to tell a much greater story, a story that is much more a human story than than the pain and the self-pity that comes from being in pain, right?
Yeah.
It's more of a story that allows people to sort of jump in the flatbed of the pickup and go along for the ride.
Yeah. And I think essentially that is part of life. That is part of our existence here. That we go through these things and we sift them, and we come to an understanding. And again, in that sense, it's like Spirit. They don't judge. It's an experience. We've needed it, and we're dealing with it, hopefully, and then we learn. So I think it's sorry, go on.
And I don't want to go through it again.
Absolutely. Well, I think once we learn, my guide's just stepped in with something slightly poetic, and he said, "It's wonderfully traumatic, isn't it?" And I thought, that's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
It's So sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
So let's talk a little bit about your career as a comedian, because again, a lot of funny things come from trauma, don't they? We have to find some way of expelling it and dealing with it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when I was a little girl, some of what looked magical to me was Hollywood. I really thought that Gilda Radner, who was on Saturday Night Live, and Jane Curtin and the Coneheads, and Deborah Harry, even on Solid Gold, singing at the front of a band. I just saw these women, and I thought, my God, they are just out in front, and people love them. And maybe if I was in that space, I would be loved and feel complete and happy too. And so I think that was an idea that I devised when I was young. And I always wanted to make movies that mattered. And comedy became sort of a vehicle for that, I think. When I realized how much it cost to go to school for acting and all of those things, I decided to go the route of Saturday Night Live. And, I'm from Chicago. And I'm from Chicago, and I found Second City, and I learned about John Belushi and a lot of folks who had gone there that I loved and respected. And so I had this little plan in my head that if I studied comedy and went to Second City, that somebody would see how amazing and talented I was, and they would sweep me off of, the concrete in front of Second City, and they would drive me to Hollywood, and they'd put me in a movie, and then I could just take care of everybody in my family, and that was the dream.
Yeah. Happily ever after.
It didn't quite, it didn't quite happen that way, Leo. It didn't. Interestingly, strangely, as shocked as you might be, it didn't play out quite that way. But what I did do is I found that my sexuality was different than the norm, so to speak. That led me to the relief of alcohol. Alcohol did what alcohol does in alcoholics, and it became necessary for me to drink more than I had drinking originally in order to get any relief. And there were no problems that it was causing in the beginning, but then it started causing, it started offering less relief and more problems. And when I was in that stage of my drinking is about when I found myself at Second City studying comedy. Tina Fey and Rachel Dratch and Tim Meadows and some of those guys were on the main stage. They were doing the paid shows out of Chicago Second City improv shows when I was in the school training. So I saw them, and I knew that they were pretty great. I didn't know how much they would eclipse my own dreams of a career, but I started doing Second City, and I found that improv was difficult for me because I didn't know how to use my own voice. Yeah. And I found myself falling into the stories that others were creating, which seemed to be pretty shallow and goofy to me. I wanted to kind of go deeper into the human experience, and improv wasn't offering me that. I had an instructor at the time. His name is Bob Dassey, and he said to me, maybe if you found your voice, you could guide us into some richer scenes. And I appreciated that. I wasn't able to hear it for years, but I did finally hear it in my recovery. So anyhow, I studied at Second City for that long, and then I left and found stand-up as an option. I had done stand-up for the first time in college. Yeah. Been thrown on the stage, and then I pursued it again after college and after Second City, and it was great. I had some success in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. I did travel a bit. I did do some TV. I met a lot of my stand-up comedy heroes. I think I grew a lot in that time because I was sort of aligning with all of the many ideas of myself. I was learning how to do the same jokes in a black club as I was doing in a gay club, as I was doing in a white club, as I was doing in a mixed club. I had, for a long time, had different sets to please the club that I thought, I needed to cater to. But I found myself being able to do one act. But I also found my drinking taking its toll. And, so those two things kind of converged at one point, and I ultimately had to decide whether I could survive in Los Angeles wanting fame and wanting movie opportunities as badly as I did, and managed to maintain my sobriety. I didn't know that I was going to survive if I kept pursuing it, so I left. Yeah.
And again, that's a brave decision, isn't it? And as we said at the start of the show, we get into an environment where for example, in this, drink is the common commodity. That's how we get past. And I think it's easy to drift into these things because, I think at first you're just conforming, everybody's drinking, I'll have a drink. Then you find out it's quite fun, and then you find out it's not so much fun, and then it's really destructive. Because I think people feel that you must have a personality flaw, or you must be a certain type of person, and so it's going to be inevitable that you're into drugs or you're into drink or anything else. But it's not like that, is it?
No. No, and I think that we could, that's a great thread to tie all of what we've been talking about, too, is that addiction and alcoholism, well, alcoholism is addiction just to the drug of alcohol. But these things, we've created ideas about who they belong to. And they're all myths. We need to see each other as individuals, and we need to see the problems as the problems and walk alongside each other. Yeah. It's devastating when addiction takes hold. It's devastating to the individual that it's got a hold of, and to everybody who cares for them.
Yeah. Again, I think it's what society as well would count as the norms. I don't bet at all, but over here there's quite a big betting thing, and of course you've got all the apps and that, and they kind of throw this at you. We'll give you £20 free. We'll do this, we'll do that, and right at the bottom of it comes, don't bet more than you can afford, which is a little bit like saying to an alcoholic, here's 4 bottles, but only drink 3, society's kind of grown up like that. So again, I think going back to that point that you made earlier, we've got this environment which is kind of normal because we're used to it, but actually, again, it's not normal, is it? It's destructive.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, we've normalized a culture, and multitudes of cultures on this planet. We've normalized behaviors that allow people to find themselves complying but not developing. And, growing and developing and thriving is not, the status quo. Those are not the things that our teenagers or our 20-somethings are, most interested in, maybe.
Yeah. I've got a thing about some of the films, the Hollywood violence, because again, it's seen as a good thing. It doesn't matter how we kill people, we're doing good. We're going to clear out the drug barons, and there's so much violence there that again is the norm. And I know people say, well, it's just a film, but I think you do get affected by it because like alcohol, I suppose, there's a numbing effect, and you see so much of it, and then it's kind of, oh yeah, that happens.
Right. Yeah.
So and I think Hollywood needs to change, but of course Hollywood's still going to do what makes money, so it's going to be a long time changing. But again, I think with what you're doing and with people discovering spirit and understanding that spirit's actually in practically every sense, but it's not connected to religion as such. It's a thing on its own.
Right.
And as we discover this, that we can make changes.
I agree. And I think some of the things that you just said are so important, such critical pieces for this conversation. For instance, the Hollywood and the violence and I mean, you start to look at, does art reflect life? Does life reflect art? At chicken or the egg, which is which? All of that stuff, right? These are discussions that we're never going to get to the bottom of. We're never going to be in agreement about. But can we have an awareness about the way that the human psychology works in terms of desensitizing after exposure, right? The more we expose ourselves to something, the less likely we are to be alarmed by it. And so keeping in mind, and it makes me think of this story about the frog who's in the boiling pot of water. I don't know if you've heard this, but
No.
if you take, so for instance, let's take violence in Hollywood as boiling water. Okay, if you take a frog and you put him into a pot of water that's boiling, you drop him into boiling water, he's going to leap out.
Yeah.
Because it's hot. It's startling. Everything in his physiological body says no, right? And his instincts kick in, and he tries to survive, and he jumps out. Now, if you put that same frog in a pot of water that is not boiled, it's just room temperature, and you put the flame on low, and you gradually increase the temperature to a boil, that frog will fall asleep in the water and be cooked to death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's this idea that we gradually become normalized, and who's responsible for that, right? Whose responsibility is it? And I have this call to us all that we learn to take responsibility for ourselves, accountability for ourselves. When we blame, there's going to be no change. Blame is like blame is putting a stake in the ground and claiming this is where I'm going to live. If I'm going to blame you, then I've set up camp right here. I'm not moving. And if we can learn that blame is not valuable, accountability and honesty and those things that we need to be with ourselves, we can choose. If we watch a show that's violent, we can choose this and that. We can decide to stay in the water or jump out. Yeah. And here's the good news too, though. Leo, I think that Hollywood is up against its greatest battle right now, because social media and YouTube and your show and all of these other things have put the media into the average person's hands. And as we decide to generate media that serves humanity, it may be what people ultimately start choosing. And I hope for that. Do you know the story of the two wolves?
No.
A Cherokee story. There's this grandfather, and I'm going to tell you the short version. Yep. There's a grandfather and a grandson, and they're sitting alongside a campfire. And grandson says, I was so mad at it. Kid at school today, I just wanted to punch him in the nose. And Grandpa says calmly, yes, grandson, we all have two wolves inside of us fighting for control. And we have a good wolf who is full of light and generosity and compassion, love and patience. And we have a bad wolf, or a dark wolf, who is full of envy and greed and anger and rationalization and blame. And they're fighting. They're at each other's throats, and they sit there in silence. And the grandson thinks about it and says, well, Grandpa, who wins? And the grandfather looks at him and he says, the one that you feed, son.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the tenets of spiritualism, kind of 7 tenets, one of those is personal responsibility. It's very clear we can do what we like here, but there is personal responsibility while we're here, but it's 10 times heavier when we get over. And if we can learn it here and deal with it and understand it, then there's not so much of a burden when we get over. And I think that's one of the things of society, isn't it? All around the world, that, if I can get away with it, great, who's going to know? And we've got that kind of attitude, haven't we, as a world population? Nobody sees me, it's fine. Who's going to know? Who's going to get hurt? And we kind of we push those boundaries, and I think some of it's encouraged by media, and possibly because I think one of the strange things of our world is we go, oh, drugs are bad, and they destroy your life, and this is that, and that happens, and then it goes like, well, look at the drug barons, they're worth millions. They've got cars, they've got this, and it's like, hold on, it's just come into balance. And we seem to be quite good at that, don't we, in justifying, well, yes, it is bad, but have you seen the lifestyle some of these guys have got? It's completely upside down, isn't it?
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And as we were speaking earlier just about, kind of moderation. It's like anything is good or anything is bad if you do too much of it. I don't have any hostility toward drugs and alcohol, although I've discovered for myself that it's not wise that I use them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't damn the experience for anybody else. I say, have at it. And I say, if you find that a day arrives that it is, you are no longer using them, they are using you. If you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself, if you look at your child's face and they're wondering who you are, if you're looking at your spouse and they're shaking their head and walking out the door, if those days arrive for you around drinking or drugging, then there's help.
Yeah.
But I think that, feeling differently than we feel is a huge piece of what being human is all about, right? Wanting to alter what it feels like to be in this skin. And that's part of the name of my book and my website, and my sort of outlook is let's focus on the soul and learn how to live in the skin, Let's stop focusing on the skin and wondering about the soul. Let's live as the soul and learn how to live in the skin, right? Because we're here.
Absolutely. And again, I agree with you 100%. And that's why I find the title so emotive. It explains a plethora of things. We're just going into a break in a moment. So if you do want to call in, you haven't got a lot of time, it's 702-425-9230, or contact us via chat, and we'll be straight back after this.
This is the voice of spirit, your connection to the other side.
To understand something spiritually, you must experience it. And in order to experience it, you have to experience it in your imagination.
Explore with us by calling 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Everything that now exists was once imagined. Therefore, everything that is going to exist must first be imagined.
Back with your guide to spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Leo Bonomo.
After these brief words from our sponsors.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie.
featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about. At least, not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
You are listening to the all-new KCOR, The Core. KCOR broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada to the entire universe.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is your captain. I'd like to welcome you on Jackpot Airlines Flight 1610, service to Lost Wages.
They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, apparently, they need a reality check done Vegas style.
Vegas, 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 Vegas.
Tune in Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, for Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Biggest star in the world, bigger than Britney and Christina put together.
If it's happening on the Vegas Strip, you'll know about it here first.
You are a dirty little fun haver.
Join Jessica Johns as she explores and goes behind the scenes of what's hot and what's not. From the best entertainment Vegas has to offer to national celebrity gossip.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Jessica has her finger on the heartbeat of the city, and she's waiting to share it with you. Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns. Wednesday, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern. She does Vegas right.
Yeah, baby.
If you love them enough to sit through their favorite boy band with them, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Voice of Spirit, your connection to the other side.
There's no accidents in this universe. We all show up here with a purpose. There's an intelligence that is a part of everything and everyone, and all of us are connected to it.
Connect with us on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Even better, join us live in our chat room at KCORradio.com. To get a free reading during the show, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers, use Skype name KCOR Radio. And now, inspirational clairvoyant medium, psychic, and your connection to the spirit, the host of the Voice of Spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Hi, and a very, very warm welcome back. Once again, we've kind of leapt to the last segment. I really don't know where the time goes. And I've got a lovely lady here, Jen SluMac. And just during the break, we were talking about how we're at a stage world-wise where it seems whatever your imagination can dream up, the world will provide. And I'm not saying that from necessarily a positive thing. It's just like whatever you want, that's it. No restriction.
Yeah.
And you know, it's I think one of the things for a portion of society certainly is that there is no limit, there are no boundaries, and we've kind of just broken all that, haven't we?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's really important for each individual to ask themselves, with this magical tool of imagination that human beings have, am I feeding it with fear or am I feeding it with faith? You know, is the story that I tell myself about this world that we live in, is it a scary story or is it a hopeful story? You know, because ultimately the story that I tell myself is the character that I play in the world, you know, and I have to pay attention to that because ultimately we're going to all join hands and take count. What team are we on, right? What are we building here?
Absolutely. I've just had an interesting thought. And I don't think it was mine. I think it's my guide kind of throwing things at me. But where there is no kind of boundary at all now? Do you think we'll get to a point, and again, for some reason, alcohol seems to be the preferred vehicle here. Do you think that we'll get to a point where we get drunk, we're sick, and we go, oh, never again, as a society, and mean it? Do you think we're kind of overdosing on everything, and we'll get to a point of been there, done that, not interested anymore?
I believe that is happening all the time, just not collectively. And when I said earlier that I think I like to focus on the news that's directly around me, the people who are healing, the people who are taking their lives back through recovery or reuniting with their families. I see that never again moment happen all the time with people who've been incarcerated, who've been addicted, who've been in horrible relationships. I see people taking back their lives and building lives of service to humanity all the time. And I don't know that it will ever happen all at once, because we all have to go through the journey that leads us to that place. I think it's part of our growth, part of our development. And we have to choose if we want to be among those who are growing and healing and serving, or whether we want to be among those who are still trying to get away with something. And eventually, to answer your question, I think the seesaw will land in the favor of healing. Dr. King said, I believe that the arc of history leans toward justice or something. I'm sure I butchered it, but the idea is, we're going to end up on the mountaintop eventually. That's the hope.
My guide said several years ago that in 20 to 30 years time, he called Earth this place will be completely different. And I do think that we are certainly gathering speed in that. There are so many wars, there are so many oppressive things, and I think countries are starting to stand up now and say, we don't want this. And yes, there's oppression, there's sanctions, between different countries and things going on. I'm not necessarily singling out the USA for this, because Britain's just as guilty, very complicit. But I think as other countries are standing up and saying, actually, we're not having this, I do think the world would become a better place. I think we are actually accelerating towards that. And I think as people realise, as you've said eloquently several times, that they have a voice, I'm sure that light bulb moment will come and they'll think, well, I have made some changes. I can make more. I now understand that it's actually us that has the power rather than a few people in government. And as we start to see the message change, one person with a voice that stands up and says, you know what? I'm not a big fan of the way that I've been living. Like, this doesn't work for me, and here's why. And suddenly that is the media, because it's in our hands. Somebody on YouTube goes viral and all of our kids see somebody saying it's not cool to do this or to do that. It just takes a few of us to say something in contrast to that which has been accepted as true, to at least get people into that place where they need to resolve that dissonance, right? That the two ideas cannot be held at the same time as true without without discomfort, right? We have to resolve that discomfort. Absolutely. And I know that many artists, whether it's actors or musicians or painters, they tend to be very mediumistic, very psychic. I know David Bowie is very psychic, but I think the same applies to Michael Jackson. And there is that song, isn't there? I'm looking at the man in the mirror, understanding that he's got to change himself if he just starts with one thing, as you've said. I can't change the world maybe, but I can change me, and that's infectious. And I think coming from a person like Michael Jackson and other peoples, they have a portion of the world's population's attention, you know, and I think sometimes the lyrics are people are not fully aware of what it is. They take it as one thing, you know.
Sure.
But I think there are a few messengers around the world that are working really hard. And I think what you're doing, you know, you're certainly a messenger in that way. And as people take more notice of these things, you know, it's kind of building a house a brick at a time, isn't it? And suddenly
it is.
You've got, you know, you've got this wonderful thing that's been created.
Well, and thank you for that. And I think that the more that, with all of what you just said, and the more that we start to operate honoring each other's journey, we don't have to argue with what is true or what is not, but understand that, you know, everybody sees the world through their own perception, through their own life experience, their own lived experience is what has created truth for them. And so instead of arguing it, listening and honoring their journey and experiencing somebody else's experience on this planet, right? I'm never going to walk down the street as a Black man who has been incarcerated, but my God, I can sit there and listen to him and honor his journey and learn to respect it, and in the very least, get rid of the arrogant and the simple, I know who he is, that dismisses and allows politics to take its course so quickly. If we can return the fact that we are all having a human experience, and there's joy and there's pain and there's learning and there's, you know, we get to that place, we can focus on what we put into the world, and we can have conversations. Let's just talk to each other. We don't have to shut down conversations. Let's talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, I think listening without judging, listening without arguing, I think that really is the next step in understanding that, you know, there are huge similarities between us all, but there are those important differences. And it isn't about who's right or wrong. It's a different piece of music. It's a different book. It's a different film. You know, and it's like, oh, never thought about that before. That's interesting. You know, I think getting to that stage, you know, I know we will get there. And I think we are accelerating to that point. And you know, it's discordant, it's jarring when you suddenly realize something and you think, you know, you may have all kinds of prejudices of anything, and you suddenly realize, hey, you know, that's wrong. I've put this guy in a pigeonhole. He doesn't fit. And that can make us quite annoyed, can't it? You know, I've been living my life like this for decades, and I've realized I'm wrong.
But you know what else? You know what's beautiful? Yeah, it is a wonderful thing. The beautiful thing about that, Leo, is that it's in those moments where we realize how much we don't know.
Absolutely.
And where we become almost unapologetically open and willing to listen. And it's those times that I live for in watching us grow and become open to each other, our experience. You know, it's so important.
Yeah. Well, without going #me too, I feel that, you know, that's another thing that's got wildly abused now, you know. It's, there's so many people that are judgmental, aren't they? And, you know, you kind of go in and you wear, you know, you might wear a wig and they go, that's an Afro wig. You're taking the pee out of black people. No, it's just a bit of fun. You know, we've unfortunately got a little bit of a phobia about that now, but I think that will settle down. You know, because it's wonderful to be different. You know, we should look at nature, you know, and see how many varieties there are there, whether we're talking about, you know, birds or we're talking about fish or whatever. I think if we see ourselves as a population like that is, well, the plumage is a bit different. It's a different colour, but hey, we're all human. We seem to set ourselves apart from nature, don't we? We take all the variances there and the habits and what Mother Nature has changed to adapt, and we don't put ourselves in the same role. It's a very odd thing. It's almost like don't do as I do as I say. It's we've got a mentality, haven't we, of we're king of the earth, and that's for a reason, and we must be right. And I don't think so.
Yeah. It's such a relief to not know everything. Can I just tell you that? It's such a wonderful, wonderful place to be when somebody else has an answer, I mean, we should all try it, really. Just kind of waking up and stepping outside and being, in wonder about the clouds or the bird or the tree and it's blowing and offer prayer or thoughtfulness to those who are suffering and see how I can go and be useful today. Like that's, I don't have to know how today's going to go. I don't have to know what you think of me. I don't have to, take anything personally because it's not personal. If you throw ugly at me in whatever form or fashion, it's because you're in pain. And when I learned that, I learned that you're only ugly to somebody when you're hurting. Then I have compassion for you, Yeah.
There was something that you hinted at there, which again has just come to mind. And it's like, as we're growing, we get very used to, we're being taught this is something new. We're learning all the time. And then we seem to get to a point as an adult, and this is just a generalization, where it's, well, no, I've learned it all. These are my opinions, and they're right. And nobody's going to change. We seem to switch, don't we, from learning mode to I know it all, which is is quite scary. Personally, and I've said this many times in many interviews, I learn something every day, spirit-wise. And what I've really learned is I don't know anything. It's, I mean, we can't know everything about even any particular subject in a lifetime, let alone the whole gamut of, just learning to try and survive and eating and doing a job and, just getting through life and relationships and that. We don't have the capacity to learn it all, but the ego kind of says, this is right, this is my opinion, and nobody's going to change it. It's quite a sad thing, isn't it, really, that we don't approach the rest of our life like school. I'm learning.
Yeah. But and that would be beautiful. And that's kind of, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to say that that's where I try to live now. It's taken a lot to get me to that. But I think what you did beautifully right there is just sort of delineate between the hard metallic, structure of ego and wanting to have accomplished something, be right, stand strong, and be unmovable versus the soft and flowing nature of spirit and love and calm energy that allows us to just be. All my life, my mother told me, honey, just be, because I was always trying so hard to stand still, right? Just always so much energy I was feeling and so many thoughts and people's pain and anxious and all of it. I felt it and I was just spinning, standing still. And she would say, honey, just be. And I didn't know what that meant or how to do it. But today I know that I don't know. I know that what I do know helps to inform the way I work with others. And I am just trying to be.
Yeah. Because it's often bandied around, that term, isn't it? Or, just be or know yourself. But one thing I've realised is we're definitely like a huge onion. And you just think you've got to knowing yourself, and another layer comes off, and
no
it's like,
kidding.
oh, yeah, and
yeah.
I don't think we'll know ourselves till we get over, when we'll understand a little better.
Yeah, and we got to know ourselves so we can get out of the way of spirit. That's
absolutely.
why we got to know ourselves. Know yourself so that you know when you get in the way of spirit trying to move in this world. That's it. Get out of the way.
Yeah, and knowing when ego's kicking in and thinking, well,
That's
got
it.
to deal with that. Yeah, it's
yes, sir.
God, it's fascinating. I can't wait to read the book. So remind us when it's coming out again. Well, you don't quite know, but it's coming out on Amazon at some point.
It'll be out this spring. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It'll be out this spring, and you can pre-order it from my website, soulnotskin.com. Encourage you to go there and pre-order if you'd like. Contact me through the website. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts or feedback or anything. I just love communicating with my folks, my audience, and it will be available on Amazon and several other outlets this spring. And you can learn all of that at my website, soulnotskin.com.
Fantastic. And the Soul Not Skin is also your radio show, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not quite as established as yours is, Leo. I've got a fledgling radio show that I've been doing. I love to talk with people. I love story, and I love to share other people's stories. So it's something that I do, and maybe one day it'll be up and running as well as yours is, for sure. But there's some things on my site.
Bless you. Yeah. Well, it's for people to look and to listen and to communicate and explore.
Absolutely.
We've still got a few minutes, but it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you, and it has been a real privilege. I'm kind of blown away in a sense, and again, I know I keep going on about the title, but I think it's so relevant, that we treat each other as souls rather than what we see or the prejudice we may have grown up with. It was when I was growing up, we used to have little gollywogs on jars of jam and things, and then of course that become kind of a derogatory term, so we weren't allowed. And as children, we grew up, and I don't think children see colour, they just see other children. And we went through a phase here, and I'm sure you did there, where we went into school and they said, you can't say that. And, we got to the ridiculous stage where he said, you can't say blackboard because, of the word black. It seems okay to say whiteboard for some strange reason. But I think as children, as we grow up and they say, you can't say that, that's wrong because we've kind of gone full circle with this, where we just, we're indoctrinated into these things, aren't we? And it's crazy stuff. Yeah.
And the sensitivities are usually when the seeming majority has come to consciousness that something affects somebody differently, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually the person, the gay person who has spent their whole life feeling never mentioned, never visible, never real, that every time that gay or fag or one of these words is used, shoves them deeper into shame. And nobody who isn't gay is aware of it happening. And so then when people say, you shouldn't say gay or you shouldn't say fag, people who have been using it casually sort of don't realize that it feels like overkill, right? But really what we're trying to do is allow the same air for everybody, right? And then you go too far in that direction or in this direction. So it's always going to be a seesaw on this in the human experience. I really believe so.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When I was at school and 90% of the kids were black. Then they wanted to be called coloured, and if you called them black, that was an insult. And now it's kind of the other way round, and it's just fashion, it's just ego. In a sense, it doesn't really mean anything, because again, as you've eloquently
except to the person that it's being used for, right?
Absolutely,
it means something to them. Yeah,
absolutely. And we've kind of come 100% round again, and so it doesn't matter what you like, it's souls, not skin. I'm so indebted to you. It's been absolutely fantastic. So if you're interested, and I'm sure you are, you can get in touch with Jen on soulnotskin.com. That's also the name of her radio show, and it's also the name of her book, which is coming out in the spring. So once again, thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege.
Leo, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our time together. Thank you.
And I've really enjoyed it too. And again, 2 hours, it just vanishes. It disintegrates. We'll see you. It's incredible to me how it goes, but it's just like, that's it. It's gone. 2 hours of my life, which I've enjoyed, I must say.
Sure.
So we'll be back next week, and we'll see you then. And God bless. Take light and love each other. God bless.
You've been listening to Leo Bonomo, the host of The Voice of Spirit. Live every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on the show, guests, and host of The Voice of Spirit, or to book a private reading, please visit leo-bonomo.com. That's leo-bonomo.com. Your connection to the other side is just a phone call away. The Voice of Spirit.
It is amazing, is it not?
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.